Okay, let's get started. So it's time for our first keynote. My colleague from the University of Bonn, whom I had not yet the pleasure of meeting at home, so we have to travel to Fifth Avenue to finally meet, but so much the better. And her work was pointed out to me by my co-directors as we were discussing whom should we invite? Who are the relevant people that might have something significant to say about precisely the intersection of iconoclasm and image cultures in the age of AI? And then I remember Paul and that saying, well, do you know Birgit Mersmann from the University of Bonn? And so that's the reason. It's not, like a Bonn in-game at this point, but maybe in the future. So welcome, Birgit Mersmann, to our Fall Institute here at the New School. Birgit is professor of contemporary art and digital image cultures at the University of Bonn since 2023, after a long time as professor at the University of Duisburg-Essen, moved to Bonn in 23. And she works, in addition to working on, straightforwardly on various dimensions of iconoclasm. Her 1999 book is about this, among other things, Bildersturm und Bilderstreit, so exploring various dimensions of iconoclasm. In addition to that, she has a strong profile in transcultural research on the types of issues we're dealing with here, so not exclusively Western at all, as we will probably also see today. And that's another thing that I want to emphasize concerning our concept of the new humanities with which we're operating, and now with the most recent edition of the Kyoto expansion of our cooperation. So we're not only interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, but also transcultural in a very important sense. That's part of the new humanities operating way beyond, like any idea of the West, et cetera. Like none of this is specifically operative in what we're doing. So much the better that we have a specialist for all of this at the same time. And we're looking forward very much to your talk. And I just also heard, which I didn't know, that Nick, who's working at my chair, wrote a paper with you on the types of issues we're discussing here. So, a lot of things that could have happened at Bonn have to happen in New York. So welcome, Birgit, and we are very much looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction here. So I would also like to thank all directors of the Institute of Philosophy and the New Humanities for really bringing me here. So it's really a pleasure of contributing to this really exciting topic that challenged me a lot, I have to confess. So it's also an experiment for me today to present these new insights. I would also like to thank Alex Englander for his support and the good organization to bring me here, and the Udo Keller Foundation for making this possible. So my talk today nicely connects to the talk of today's morning by Zed Adams, because I will also talk about the power of the photographic image, but in a different way. So about the dis- and re-empowerment of photographic images, and also on the transformation of the power of the photographic image, because I will talk about AI imaging and what I have called post-photographic iconoclasm. So it's a term coined by me, so it's cautious. So just to let you know that this is a kind of new approach. Images are defined by a paradox. They are alive, but also dead. They convert absence into presence. Throughout visual history, human beings have perceived pictures as lifelike forms. They have attributed agency, vitality, autonomy, and power to them, thereby repeatedly triggering iconoclastic disputes. I quote, "The history of images is arguably the history of their ability to arouse love and fear. Time and again, the cancellation and destruction of the idolatrous image, however so conceived, exemplifies the basic antinomy inherent in images. This thesis on the role of images in relation to human nature and history was put forward by image theorist and iconoclasm expert David Friedberg. He is the author of The Power of Images, Studies in the History and Theory of Responses from 1989, and has published more recently Iconoclasm in 2021. This is a collection of 10 essays written over a period of 15 years. So he's just updated his other essays because it's now so a pressing issue. The statement shows, unwittingly, a remarkable analogy to the history of artificial intelligence. It could, without losing any of its significance or credibility, be reformulated into the history of artificial intelligence is arguably the history of its ability to arouse love and fear. As Abhishek Prasad posits in his article, The Love and Fear of Artificial Intelligence, the relationship between human intelligence and artificial intelligence is complex and multifaceted, characterized by a mix of fascination, collaboration, and concern, unquote. It has to be acknowledged that the fascination for creating artificial intelligence is a genuinely human characteristic that evolved alongside the history of human civilization and intelligence. According to AI researcher George Sakadakis, I quote, "The quest for artificial intelligence is due to our evolutionary emotional makeup as primates. That is to say, it's impossible to separate our desire to construct intelligent machines from the deepest primal instincts that define us," unquote. This characteristic might be one of the reasons why we project human-like qualities, behaviors, and emotions onto AI systems. In other words, why we tend to affectionately anthropomorphize technical creations of artificial intelligence and that we fall in love with them. Regarding the current state of AI research, it is truer than ever that artificial intelligence is modeled after and with human intelligence. However, there's also a deep-seated human fear that a self-aware and autonomous artificial intelligence, termed artificial superintelligence, will outpace human intelligence in the future and eventually do away with the entire Homo sapiens species. The human love for and partnership with AI could conceivably turn self-destructive, as Prasad sums up in the metaphor of a love-hate relationship. I quote, "Artificial intelligence is like your best friend in many ways, who is stronger, smarter, and more intelligent than you. You could always count on this friend. Your friend would be there for you whenever you need him. But what if the best friend of yours, who knows all your little secrets, all your weakness, turns into your biggest enemy? AI is somewhat like that. It's great as long as it is on your side, but it becomes dangerous when this highly intelligent artificial species stands against you," unquote. Bringing these two theses on the relationship of humans to images and to artificial intelligence together, the theme of this lecture evolves, namely love and fear of the synthetic image. By synthetic image, I'm referring to an image fully or partially computer-generated via the use of algorithms, software tools, or innovative AI methods such as deep neural networks. In the context of my presentation, the concept of the synthetic image largely, but not entirely, intersects with the AI-generated image, in particular the text-to-image synthesis produced by prompting. The first part of the lecture title was inspired by the video, The Fear of the Synthetic Image, produced by Anna Engelhardt, an alias of a video artist and writer. The video, I quote, traces the production of images from military simulations to technical interfaces to identify a new political order produced by a synthetic content, unquote. It addresses the human fear that through the power of synthetic AI-based image generation, the photo and video journalistic image loses its evidentiary value as a representation of real events. That's what we talked already about this morning. As I've mentioned, the response toward images is ambiguous, shaped by a dual affective attitude. Apart from fear, there's also a strong fascination for AI's relatively novel ability to synthetically generate images and produce visual fabulations of future worlds. For this reason, we have to look at the love and fear of the synthetic image as two sides of a single phenomenon that informs and triggers iconoclasm in diverse ways and on multiple levels. This approach also implies a shift in perspective in iconoclasm research, namely a refocus on the act of synthetic image generation grounded in and perceived as an iconoclastic practice. As I've argued in my book, Image Controversies, Contemporary Iconoclasm in Art, Media, and Cultural Heritage, which was co-edited with Christiane Kruse and Arnold Batetsky, I quote, "With the advent of digital imaging cultures, the meaning of iconoclasm as a place-centered and site-specific practice of violence must be rethought. There is an urgent need to investigate contemporary electronic iconoclasm as a set of various digital practices, critical strategies, and net political struggles for, but also against, data sovereignty, imagineering power, and the pursuit of truth regimes, particularly in the age of AI. The topic of this fall institute is completely new territory, and so we have to blaze our own trail. With that in mind, it appears necessary to historicize and specify iconoclasm in relation to media technological disruptions, culture turns, and image creational paradigm shifts. The philosophers Eugenia Roldan and Manuel Molina have proposed a distinction between the various periods of iconoclasm throughout human history. Their division of iconoclasm into three eras was inspired by the three eras of the image as outlined by José Luis Brea in his book Las Tres Eras de la Imagen. This was published in 2010. The first era is called meta-iconoclasm, which is characterized by the destruction of material images, that is classical artworks such as paintings, sculptures, and architecture, and it is said to originate in the Byzantine iconoclasm controversy. The second era, defined as film iconoclasm, is identified as an iconoclastic response to the circulation of the technically reproduced image at the beginning of the 20th century. It refers to the tradition of avant-garde cinema and uses of montage to destroy the continuity of image flow and the linearity of the visual narrative. For my lecture, the third era, identified as E-iconoclasm, is the most relevant. This one is considered systemic, a global effect of digitization and its excess of images circulating through digital media and networks. According to the authors, I quote, "The abundance of images on the screen leads to their self-cancellation, to a subjective gaze incapable of perceiving and processing the infinite flow of digital images," unquote. To intervene into the iconosphere and break the systemic self-cancellation of images through overabundance, the authors call for the mobilization of iconoclasm as a critique of the digital scopic regime. Unfortunately, artificial intelligence is not mentioned in the article as a driver of image access in the digital age. Maybe it was just published around the year when it was not yet so topical. But I think AI iconoclasm can be considered a subcategory of also electronic iconoclasm, but one we're studying as a new iconoclastic phenomenon with its own conditionalities and features. Roldan's and Molina's classification into 3 eras of iconoclasm represents a first constructive approach to better understand forms and practices of iconoclasm in relation to the technical mediality, cultural history, and social function of images. However, it appears somewhat schematic in its rough division into 3 subsequent periods of iconoclasm. As recent clashes over monuments of national and post-colonial significance have demonstrated, the era of meta-iconoclasm has not come to an end in the digital age. We live in a world of parallel universes of iconoclasm, where matter, film, and iconoclasm interrelate or partly intersect. Even the digital iconosphere is not matterless. Scholars increasingly acknowledge the presence of digital materiality. Digital artifacts such as software, online platforms, and data also possess material qualities, even though they exist as information rather than physical matter. This view exerts a strong influence on how the clash between matter and representation, alias in this case generation, is conceived in electronic and AI iconoclasm. Most striking in the iconoclasm era model of Roldan and Molina is the complete absence of photography. So if the era of film and iconoclasm are linked to the expansive circulation of technical images, then one wonders why photography as the first technical apparatus-based image in the history of image production is not taken into account as a paradigm changer in the history of iconoclasm. This is all the more surprising given that AI iconoclasm rests upon, reflects, and reconfigures the photographic image, as well as its claim to and myth of truth. In the following section, I will explore the relationship between AI imaging and post-photographic iconoclasm. By combining post-photographic theory with image and iconoclasm studies and crossing the artistic fields of contemporary photography, promptography, and AI art, I will trace the transformation and metabolization of photography in the age of AI imaging. This analysis of photography and synthetic imagery will highlight 3 dimensions of AI-induced iconoclasm. The intrinsic iconoclastic nature of the AI image, then iconoclashes between different types, orders, and agents of images, and third, the critical power of iconoclasm as an escape strategy from the digital image regime and dominant AI systems. Now I come to my examples. So I try to combine a little bit of theory of after and post photography with a flow of images as we find them on the net. And my first act is on photo clash, ? Death and afterlife of photography in the age of AI. Iconoclastic acts aim to distinguish between truth and falsehood. The history of iconoclasm can therefore also be understood and traced as an archaeology of hatred and fascination, as Bruno Latour did in the exhibition Iconoclash, which he curated together with Peter Weibel at the Center for Art and Media, so the famous ZKM in Karlsruhe in 2002. A world beyond image wars seems unthinkable, especially in times of image access, which is further fueled by AI photo and video generators and thus radicalizes the struggle for the future of truth and the visual representation of the world. Iconoclasm remains a persistent theme in the history of human thought and ideology, but its motivations, manifestations, and effects are evolving. Accordingly, a new post-photographic iconoclasm can be identified and situated just at the intersection of E-iconoclasm and AI iconoclasm. In his examination of image wars and the question of how to escape the machinery of representation, Bruno Latour has made a subtle distinction between iconoclasm and iconoclash, I quote. Iconoclasm is when we know what is happening in the act of breaking and what the motivations for what appears as a clear project of destruction are. Iconoclash, on the other hand, is when one does not know, one hesitates, one is troubled by an action for which there is no way to know, without further inquiry, whether it is destructive or constructive, unquote. In my view, the uncertainty captured in the term iconoclash can be transferred to the current situation of photography in relation to digital imaging and AI imaging, insofar as it is unclear, and this mostly applies to current post-photography theory, whether AI is destroying the photographic image or contributing to its constructive and creative reanimation. In the context of inter- and transmedia image research, and with a focus on digital and AI-generated images, I apply the term iconoclash to the clash between different forms and functions of media images, visual concepts, and aesthetic traditions. This collision can have destructive but also constructive effects, or both at the same time. Since the conflict between the photographic image as it stands in the technical aesthetic tradition of the 19th century and the AI-generated image as the techno-futuristic image of the 21st century is at the center of current disputes over images, power, and truth, a media specification should be made and the concept of photoclasm and photoclash introduced here for the first time. A gravestone for photography created in 2025 by an unknown maker with the aid of AI imaging commemorates the deadly attack on AI on the history of photography. Its inscription reads, I quote, "In memory of photography, so the years 1826 till 2025, a witness to truth and a keeper of light, killed by AI." And then, this is very important, a replacement that never touched the moment. Although the truthfulness of photography was contested from the day of its invention in regard to techniques of retouching and other forms of manipulation, it holds true that a photorealistic AI image never directly relates to a decisive moment in reality. There is no direct referent, no lighting in the outside world, only the generation of an artificial reality that draws from a vast multitude of visual data. The conceptualization of post-photography is largely based on the story, or shall we say myth, of the killing of traditional analog photography through digital photo imaging and, as a technical follow-up, AI imaging. The photo theoretician Geoffrey Batchen was among the first to attribute the death of photography to digital imaging. In this context, a comparison was repeatedly drawn between two key moments: when painting was proclaimed dead following the invention of photography, and subsequently when film-based photography was proclaimed dead following the introduction of computer-based images. In their essay, AI and the Death of Photography, Edward Bateman and Robert Hirsch note, I quote, "In the 19th century, it was said that photography would kill painting. In the 20th century, it was that digital imaging would kill dark room craft. Now some declare that AI has sounded photography's final death knell," unquote. What we know by now is that neither painting nor photography are dead, but that both forms of visual representation had to transform and are constantly being reinvented under new technology and competitive conditions of visualization. The emergence of post-photographic theory became manifest from the mid-1990s, the boom years of digital imaging reflected in the so-called iconic turn in culture, science, and society. The replacement of film-based photography through digital photography caused a crisis in the production and reception history of photography, since it fundamentally shook up the previously known ontology of the photographic image. As Juan Fontcuberta, theorist and curator of the post-photographic condition, commented on the leap from silver salts to silicon, I quote, "A photograph built up as a mosaic of directly intervenable pixels exploded the founding myth of indexicality and transparency that had underpinned the consensus regarding the credibility of cameras' products. For digital photography, truth was an option, not an obstinate obsession," unquote. The post-mortem of post-photography is connected to the massive proliferation of digital images that look exactly like photographs. That is, to their artificial nature that seemingly blurs the distinction between truth and falsehood. Through digitization and net-driven circulation, photography experienced a fundamental displacement. It was dematerialized and turned into a migratory form of networked imaging, a mode and practice of liquid photography existing everywhere as everywhere. A consequence of this ubiquitous mobilization of the photographic image was its dissolution, even loss of authority as a medium of truth and memory. In this transmutation of the core values identified with traditional pre-digital photography, theoreticians Batchen and Fontcuberta recognize an epistemological shift with far-reaching implications for culture, society, and humanity at large. Post-photography is not considered a style or movement or historical epoch, but an existential condition and experience of digital life and culture. This existential ontology of photography in the digital age is aptly captured by photo and video artist Victoria Fu in a quote from her essay, "Why Photography?" And I'm quoting her. "I'm not sure what photography is. It is everything and everywhere, like a spirit that's left its body. Photography is not tied to a camera or any apparatus anymore. As many thinkers have postulated, photography is now more a state of being, an event. It has become a fiction, a fabrication. We and the world around us are reconstituted in parallel image universes. It seems impossible to make work that doesn't use or acknowledge photography because it's now an elemental part of being." Unquote. Following in the footsteps of Geoffrey Batchen and Juan Fontcuberta as the first to analyze the emerging post-photographic condition, media scholar Juana Zilinska has outlined a conceptual framework for a philosophy of after photography in her book, The Perception Mode, Our Photographic Future Between the Eye and AI. So it's a nice wordplay. As the subtitle underscores, she specifically engages with the effects of AI imaging on human photography. The technological breakthrough of AI in digital imaging implies a change in perspective. The definitions of post-photography tend, so in her opinion, to be past-oriented. They lament the loss of values such as photography's maybe myth or claim to truth and evoke its death. Whereas Batchen's definition of post in post-photography refers to an era after photography, Fontcuberta's definition of post already includes a transcendent perspective pointing towards a beyond photography. Contrary to these retrospective definitions of an outpaced photography, the philosophy of after photography as put forth by Zielinska is forward-looking and future-oriented. The term after photography seems inspired by the notion of photography after photography, an after conditionality that served as a title for an exhibition at the Fotomuseum Winterthur in Switzerland and the accompanying catalogue edited by Hubertus von Amelungsen, Stefan Igelhaut, and Florian Rotzer in 1995. Zielinska uses it, however, with a slightly altered meaning. Its focus is not on what happens to the medium of photography and the photographic image, but to the, I quote, wider condition of the world affected by photography. I quote her, after photography signifies a time that has been shaped by photography, rather than a specific medium that developed from photography. It is a mode of thinking that is itself after modernist, because it attempts to recuperate beyond melancholia and mourning. A philosophy of after photography is thus the mode of thinking and seeing for a future that will be photographic, but in a way that we may not always be able to recognize as such, unquote. It is a new feature and identity of photography transmuting under conditions of AI imaging that a philosophy of after photography endeavors to investigate. According to Zielinska, after photography is part of the so-called perception machine that entails 3 dimensions: machine vision, reconfigured human perception, and society as an all-perceiving machine. Embedded in this machinery, after photography can also signify an after human photography, that is, photography whose production, processing, and perception are detached from the human eye due to the use of computer vision and AI imaging as seeing and image generating machines. In the face of artificial intelligence, von Guberta had already pointed to the fact that post-photography challenges the philosophy of consciousness and the human condition of image making. In the response to the post and transhuman reconfiguration of photography, he calls upon us to acknowledge the critical corpus of post-photography as an offer, I quote, to define the horizon on which we want to position ourselves or prepare antidotes to counter the dangers that we want to avoid, unquote. Despite some transitions and overlaps, to my mind, it seems reasonable, maybe we can discuss it then, to maintain the distinction between post-photography as a nostalgic farewell to the traditional medium and mediality of the photographic image under conditions of digitality, and after photography as an embrace of digital photography, its recognition as an existential transformative force, future-oriented imaginary practice, and post-human agency under AI conditions. Accordingly, I suggest we differentiate between post-photographic and after-photographic iconoclasm. It's not always easy to distinguish, but there are also overlaps, but I think it makes sense to do so. And in general, when digital imaging is the point, I would refer to post-photographic iconoclasm. So this is for me this superordinate phenomenon. I come to my examples here. In the following section on iconoclastic approaches in post-photography, I will have a closer look at a selected corpus of post-photographic works in which iconoclasm is largely a component and effect of post-production. That is the editing and curating of photographs, among them, for the most part, of pre-existing images and found footage from the internet. In response to the digital excess of photographic images and the hyper-documentation of reality, photographers, and also including art photographers, are partially or completely renouncing the camera use for photo taking. Contrary to their professional role and identity as active photographers, they rely on sharing, appropriating, and incorporating the abundance of pre-existing photographs to lovingly or violently intervene and reinvent them with different features, forms, and materialities. A major conceptual move towards post-photography was the conversion of two-dimensional photographs into photo objects. Photography extended beyond its borders. It bled into other media and materialities. For photography expert Geoffrey Batchen, the various transmutations of the photograph as a given were a symptom of the post-photographic shift in the 1990s. I quote him, "Photographic imagery reappears as solid apparitions of glass, of timber, graphite, stone, paint, paper, vinyl, or wax." In Alan Garvin's work, Hourglass, a photograph of an older woman with a wrinkled neck and chin has been reworked into a steel element of an assemblage. It is laid over a skeletal structure made of an angle iron with a sheet of bent steel in the upper part of the assemblage, creating the impression of a torn photograph. At the same time, the photograph's quality of being a ready-made and an object in space is emphasized. I quote Batchen, "Like the piece of steel, the photograph curves forward into space, declaring itself as volume and making its materiality an outward part of our perceptual experience," unquote. The work title suggests that time is running out for photography, a dying medium and image-making practice whose fading memory can only be preserved when cast in steel. Jennifer Boland also tries to conserve the history of photography in a cast. In her work Milk Crown from 1987, she reappropriates Harold Atchison's famous high-speed photograph, Milk Drop Coronet Splash from 1936, to eternalize the crowning moment of a splashing milk drop frozen in time in the form of a porcelain object. This post-photographic transfer of the photograph of a milk drop coronet into a real, palpable artifact seems to push back against the disappearance of the history of photography in its most decisive moments. It evokes a substantial iconoclash between two-dimensional flatness and three-dimensional plasticity, transient imagery, and an enduring objecthood of snapshot photography. In line with this turn towards photo objects, photo assemblages, and photo sculptures, a group of post-photographers started confronting the materiality of the photograph with or deconstructive practices, borrowed from iconoclast tendencies in modern abstract art. As French artist Aliki Bren has posited, I quote, "Photography is at the same point that painting was with abstract expressionism in the 1940s. We see a material photograph, we don't see just an image," unquote. Bren has produced various series of works named after the respective type of photoclast intervention into the photographic negative, such as, so these are the names of the series, cut and repositioned, shredded and rewoven, confettied and scattered. In her punched series that you see here, the artist punched holes in film negatives of landscape photographs with trees and other nature motifs. In this destructive intervention, she blackened the photographic image in certain places to call attention to the materiality of the photograph with its brittle, tactile reality, and to make it possible to see through the flat picture's face with its representation of reality into abstract spaces and voids. In their roundness, the punched holes evoke peering through a camera or other optical apparatuses. In addition, the photographic negative's black edge is maintained, as you can see here. And this is also just to emphasize the image's photographic ontology and physical condition. The artist justifies the iconoclastic abstraction and self-reflective material turn in photography with a digital turn and related image excess. I quote, "It's because of the digital shift that photography is thinking about itself. Our eyes have become sophisticated enough to be able to enjoy a photograph even when it doesn't carry an image," unquote. The work of American photographer Charles Grock is likewise concerned with breaking through the smooth and flat surface of the photographic image. Here you see a bonsai from the series Reconstructions. His arsenal of photoclastic techniques and practices includes the tearing, burning, perforating, and sewing of photographic images. Grock expressed his obsession with, I call it, the feel and the notion of the needle piercing the image surface, which is why he decided to sew with cotton thread. Damaging the image surface calls attention to the photograph and exposes its tactile quality. The superimposition of pictures is another symptom of iconoclasm. The multiple layering of reality through digital over-visualization is reflected in palimpsestic collages of overlaid images. In Japanese photographer Suhei Nishino's diorama maps, so because we are in New York, I brought you, so there are many examples of many cities, but I think maybe you can identify some places here. So a single photograph tasked with capturing a city panorama is replaced by a meticulous collage of numerous photographs arranged by hand. So this morning we talked about the handmade picture, and this is really interesting. The artist proceeds by individually first scanning each area of the city for photo documentation. That is, he shoots innumerable rolls of film while strolling through the city, after which then he develops, prints, cuts, and arranges them, and even returns to places for reshooting when he feels that his memory and bodily sensation were not clear enough to be transferred into the photographic meta picture. So you see how he works. With a remarkable love for detail, the real-time experience of a city is transformed into the photo-collaged hyperreality of personal city mapping, a post-photographic strategy that is comparable to the so-called dérive and psychogeographic mapping practiced by the urbanist movement of the Situationist International. In the work of Korean photographer Ji Yong-ri, the collage approach takes on a nostalgic twist. He uses the technique of digital photo layering to capture the vanishing landscape of modern Korea throughout time and space. In his series Memories of the Gaze from 2012, he documents a variety of rice mills as industrial relics of Korea's rapid development from rural society to a high-tech nation. In contrast with new objectivity, the straight photo documentary style of the Bernd and Hilla Becher School from Düsseldorf in Germany reprojected his subjective memories and personal gaze onto the object of photo documentation. So each individual work in the Rice Mill series is digitally composed from layers of 140 to 160 photos taken from a myriad of angles over a period of approximately 1 year and proceeding through all 4 seasonal transitions. Due to the layering method, the photographed object seems to disappear, abstracted into blurred imagery and the vague shapes of visual memory processing. The massive overlayering of photographic images results in their dissolution, turning time and place-based photographic recording into ghostly apparitions. This is the iconoclastic abstraction effect of hyperreal digital layering that intensifies with the introduction of AI imaging. And this was the part on post-photography, because it's very important to understand the next step. So this is why I went a little bit back into history. And now I come to my second act, which is on AI imaging and artificial realities. And so this is a kind of new twist that we will look at the iconoclastic implications of image making, not anymore as a response to images, but in the process of image making itself. As previously discussed, the self-cancellation of images through digital overload is a characteristic of e-iconoclasm. This effect is exacerbated by the emergence of AI imaging, whose breakthrough for the general public occurred around 2022. In a godlike creation mode, facial and human figure generators allowed internet users to create hyper-realistic photo portraits and full body photographs in real time of people of different genders, ethnicities, and ages who never existed. So maybe when we have time after this presentation, we can try this God mode and create different figures that never existed before. So it's really fun to do so. According to Lucas Wilde, generative imagery represents a new paradigm of machine learning-based image production. The media scholar considers AI imaging to be, I quote, a partially novel form of mediation that reconfigures the distribution of agency and subject positions within contemporary media cultures, especially between human and non-human, so includes also technological as well as institutional actors, unquote. Although an abandonment of referential reality was already underway with digital images and CGI, so this computer-generated imagery, AI-generated imagery has since enforced and accelerated the creation of completely artificial realities and the extension of what Willem Flusser termed techno-imagination. Given its speed of advancement, it is on its way to destroy not only the history of human perception and the evaluation of visually referential reality, but also the reality and framing of images themselves, of the autonomy and singularity of the image, as well as the creative IP rights of artists, photographers, and other image creators. The generation of AI imagery proceeds in an algorithmic black box shaped by multi-dimensional image layering and latent space. This superimposition of images causes a heavy, highly complex iconoclash and the sense of Latour, a collision between different images and visual features in the machine learning data training set from whose fragments the artificial image is constructed. The AI image is a synthetic digital image rooted in post-photographic iconoclasm. It is synthesized from an extremely large number of datafied images competing for their feature-defining visualization power and exploited for artificial recombination and reconfiguration. Although on its surface perceived as a single and distinct image or artifact, AI-generated imagery has a collective and collaborative ontology, since it draws upon, I quote, networked interfaces between human and non-human actors, including platform, databases, and corporations, with heterogeneous dispositives, assemblages, and socio-technological configurations, unquote. Hallucination is a consequence of the derealization effect triggered by the optical metabolism of AI imaging. In Refik Anadol's Machine Hallucination series, produced since 2016, the worlds of art, culture, nature, and the cosmos are artificially recreated from the extraction of visual archives and very large databases. In my mind, Anadol comments on his series, the future of being human confronted the complex question of quantifying consciousness through AI-based digital aesthetics. My goal was to collaborate with a machine mind to redefine consciousness with a new vocabulary of word-making, unquote. Collective memories of spaces, institutions, urban environments, and nature form the basis for machine hallucination. Besides the MoMA art collection in New York here, the city of New York itself became a data-inspired source for the techno-imagination. In Unsupervised, a subseries of machine hallucinations, the artist used artificial intelligence to reimagine MoMA's art collection, which spans 200 years of art history and encompasses the wide range of genres and media as dynamic AI data paintings and sculptures. The machine learning model was trained with publicly available data about the MoMA collection. As the model walks through its conception of this vast range of works, it reimagines the history of modern art and dreams about what might have been and what might be to come. So this is a video. No, it doesn't work in this format, okay. Okay, then leave it. Machine hallucination, New York City delves into the deep stream of consciousness of the city of New York and its collective memory. A machine learning model was fed with over 100 million photos of the city of New York that were freely available on social media networks. The data processing AI brainwork resulted in a previously unseen post-photographic representation of the city of New York in a total of 1,000 latent dimensions, which was presented to the audience in a 30-minute experimental cinema loop in 16K resolution. With regard to the creation of a palimpsest-like urban space of imagination, Anadol speaks of a new form of cinematic experience with synesthetic storytelling enabled through the multi-layered manipulation of a vast visual archive beyond the conventional limits of the camera and existing cinematographic technologies. Above all, the expansion of the digital universe is seen as, I quote, a latent cosmos in which hallucinatory potential is the main currency of artistic creativity. AI's hunger for data knows no boundary. More recently, Anadol developed AI-based hallucination projects on outer spaces and nature. The AI data sculpture Nature Dreams from the Machine Hallucination series processed over 300 million publicly available nature photographs that the artist had collected in a studio between 2018 and 2021. The raw data set of nature images is the largest today to serve as a basis for an AI-generated artwork on the subject of nature. To process the very large databases, Anadol worked together with the Google AI Quantum team. By fusing AI-induced latent space with quantum hyperspace, it was possible to store the data memory of nature and generate alternative natural spaces and landscape panoramas as artificial realities. The great thematic breadth and complex scope of the raw data material fed into the machine hallucination series demonstrates that it is geared towards world making, a new world design emerging from the consciousness and memory space of the AI machine. So once again, I show the video here. The artificial stream of consciousness of the neural networks, which makes the machine dream and hallucinate, express itself in the garish streams of color that move in waves through virtual and physical spaces and across surfaces. With their slow pace, they contradict the rush of modernity's maelstrom and instead celebrate the vicious fluidity and limbo of dreamlike AI worlds. digital abstraction is the dominant visual language of Anadol's data visualization. Only rarely do concrete images emerge from the stream of consciousness of AI hallucination. So this is another example here with the nature dreams, and just to show it here. Art historians and critiques have often made disparaging judgments about AI-generated aesthetics of machine dreams and hallucinations in the oeuvre of Refik Anadol. In 2023, Jerry Saltz, the chief critic of the New York Magazine, dismissed the installation unsupervised at MoMA in New York as a sensationalist media spectacle. He described the work as, I quote him now, entertaining gimmick art. If you take away the music, it's just a banal screensaver, unquote. I myself do not want to make an art critical assessment here, whether this is serious art, scientific data visualization, or commercialized data design. Of more importance to me is the question that Kate Palmer-Albers raised in her contribution, Parafiction and the New Latent Image, with regard to Refik Anadol's Walt Disney Concert Hall dreams. I quote her, "What if the projection, rather than dwelling on the archives of an august cultural institution," so in this case the MoMA, had dwelt, in this case the Walt Disney Concert Hall, had dwelt instead on the archives of the Federal Bureau of Intelligence, or more locally, the Los Angeles Police Department, a department with a deep legacy of racial profiling and violence. How might audiences react to dreamed or imagined or fictive archival photographs of these contexts? Unquote. The AI-produced dream worlds of Refik Anadol are aesthetically embellished visions of digital data extractivism suitable for mass consumption. Trauma and nightmare are screened out and remain in the latency of unexcavated data archives. Contrary to the AI iconoclasm of abstraction in Anadol's dreaming archives, artificial archival photographs generated by AI imaging can also serve to reconstruct reality and memory. So I have to back to my presentation. In Once Upon a Garden, the artist Linda Dunya Rebes employed AI as a time machine to create a speculative archive of critically endangered and extinct flora in West Africa. Departing from an archival basis of sparse and fragmented recordings, the synthesizing power of AI imaging was used to fill the gaps in documentation and speculate on their reconstruction. I quote, "The complete archive presents 50 emergent species of speculative flora across 5 chapters. The chapters map onto the chronological progress of the project, reflecting AI models' improvement in synthesizing images," unquote. In this conceptualization, the speculative archiving of Once Upon a Garden represents a direct implementation of the technological development of AI imaging and its generative synthesizing potential. Linda Dunya Rebes is a transdisciplinary artist, designer, and curator based in Dakar, Senegal, who investigates digital society and global techno-capitalism from a combined philosophical, environmental, cultural, and identity political perspective. In 2023, she was listed by Time 100 AI among the 100 most influential people in AI. As a Black women artist from the Global South, experimenting with AI, she strives for greater inclusion, transparency, and agency over AI. In her view, the work Once Upon a Garden became, I quote, an allegory for the lossy reflection of our humanity with AI. What we don't include in training today, she says, contributes to a much hazier and incomplete understanding of our world, unquote. Rebase criticizes the limitations of AI imaging, its fragmentary and heavily biased conceptualization of reality, which is partly relevant and controversial for people and cultures from the global south. She notes, AI is falling short. At its best, it reflects a blurry picture of humanity. At worst, that picture is riddled with prejudice and hallucination, unquote. Despite her critical evaluation of AI's anti-humanist tendencies, she continues to incorporate AI imaging in her artistic practice as both a tool of participation and also resistance, because she fears that if she doesn't do so, I quote her, everything about me and where I come from will be erased from the digital memory of the world, unquote. That means that one even counters the danger of a lack or loss of human humanity, history, and memory induced by AI imaging with generative imagery. There seems to be no escape from the love and fear of the synthetic image. In this context, the significance of photography as a tool of documentation, representation of the world is actually increasing despite the post-photographic fading out discussed in the first part of my presentation. As artist and researcher Adam Harvey wrote in his essay on computer vision, I quote him, "In no small way, it is photography, photographers, and the photographs of the past that inform and haunt the ways computer vision interprets and misinterprets the world today and into the future. Photographers have a new and important role to play today in shaping the data sets that shape algorithms, which in turn reflect how we see the world and each other. Photographers, as one of the primary visual data creators, can affect the way people see the world by changing the way computers see the world, because we now see the world through computers, and computers in turn see the world through us. I hope you could follow. So this is a complex argumentation, but I think it gets very much to the point. Because of this interdependence, the photorealistic quality of AI-generated imagery is the result of the predominantly photographic composition of visual data archives and collections on the internet that feed into synthetic image generation. In the age of AI, generated photo images have a high potential to synthetically reconstruct and reanimate visual history and memory. This historical revisionism contains bits and bytes of after photographic iconoclasm. The exhibition Imagine, so it's difficult to pronounce, so photography and generative images was the first to focus on photography's intersection with artificial intelligence. Co-curated by the Hunger team of Brussels and French photo theoretician Michel Poivert, it was recently shown at the Hunger Photo Art Center in Brussels, so in the first half of this year, where I had the pleasure to see it. The curators applied a hybrid methodology to generate their exhibition pieces, combining an international call for projects with a selection of works that they discovered during their research. Their overarching theme was revisiting and reimagining historical events, characters, and situations through the lens of artificial intelligence. The exhibition challenged the creativity of photographers to reimagine human history, including also photographic history with AI imaging. Although image-to-image AI generators already exist, the work produced for the exhibition mainly relied on text-to-image prompts, so this is important. That meant that the familiar working method of photo production, that is taking photographs with or without a camera, was abandoned completely in favor of promptography. Photographers were turned into text scripters, testing their skills of linguistic expression and keywording to generate images corresponding to inner imagination and visual memory. In this performative prompting approach, the sayable becomes a precondition of the seeable, and the iconic AI turn is connected or reconnected to a linguistic turn. The art of describing pictures as precisely as possible is, as you know, an important method and even autonomous genre in the discipline of art history, so it's currently experiencing a new career in generative text-to-image prompting. According to Michel Poivert, the co-curator of the exhibition, I quote him, "Images of images, AI-generated photographs mirror our imaginaries. Photographers can thus revisit history and construct new scenarios. A visual score is written from recursivity, a constant return to what is already there," unquote. Reappropriation and reinvention shape the after-photographic reimaginations of history and the prompting experiments of the exhibition Imaging. In Isidore Ibou's work Impression, Soleil, Levant, AI prompts are used to reconstruct missing historical photographs and thus re-establish the blanked-out visual storytelling. At a flea market, the artist bought an old photo album, which he was able, after some investigation into the notes, to ascribe to a certain General Pro, who had been part of the African Infantry Regiment of the French Army in 1926 and was, it seemed, involved in military operations in Syria and Lebanon. Interestingly, all photographs had been removed from the photo album, maybe in an iconoclastic or censorship act of some kind. Only the captions, written in pencil, still legible, had remained. The artist used these photo captions as AI prompts to generate the missing photographs and thereby complete the photo album's narrative. The gap-filling reappropriation and reimagining through AI prompting evinces parallels to Linda Donier-Rebey's speculative archiving project that I just touched upon. The title of Ibou's work is borrowed from Monet's famous painting Impression Soleil Levant from 1872. The appropriation draws a parallel between the Impressionist revolution in painting and the AI revolution in photorealistic image making. As the artist explains, I quote, "It is no longer about faithfully representing reality, but about offering a new interpretation, reviving images that blend daydream and reality, past and present," unquote. The speculative promptography for recovering the lost illustrations in the photo album generates a probabilistic imagery that leaves room for the reinterpretation of history and memory beyond truth and falsehood. So another really interesting work included in the exhibition was Une Histoire Parallèle by the Franco-German artist duo Lucie de Barbois and Simone de Brodbeck. The truly after-photographic project investigates the impact of AI imaging on the history of photography by asking, what does the representation of reality mean in the age of AI? And what role does the appropriation of existing images from the internet play in this context? In a first step, the artist selected a corpus of 232 photographs that, according to their research, best summarized the history of the medium of photography before the era of AI with regard to style, technique, format, and period. After compiling the collection of iconic photographs, they used a series of prompts to translate the selected images with a Midjourney AI generator. How difficult it was to photorealistically recreate photographs that have made history and shaped the collective visual memory in the production mode of AI-generated imagery is evidenced by the fact that the artist had to undertake many prompting attempts to then approximate the original image. In the exhibition, different prompting results were included for some of the works, thus demonstrating the range of variation and deviation in AI image generation as a statistical rapprochement. Among the reimagined iconic photographs from the history of photography, we encounter AI images of Robert Capa's Falling Soldier, which you see here, then of Dorothy Lang's Migrant Mother, and also so I picked some of them, Annie Leibovitz's last portrait of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They are approximately AI analogs for the original analog photographs. That is, AI twins that call for a picture comparison between original and generated after image to identify the differences and ask, what's wrong? The AI photographs meant to be historically parallel resemble the original photographs, but they look embellished and facelifted, deplete the historical significance of the originals, and contain deviations and flaws. And now with the next one, you can also test yourself. And please let me know which one is AI generated, and maybe if you are familiar with the history of photography, you will immediately recognize them, but so which one is AI generated and which one is not? Any guess? Yeah? Yeah? So the left one here? Yeah? Mm-hmm. You all agree? I think so. Yeah. So it's so the right one is a very famous one, as you can see. So it's by Martin Parr, the artificial beach inside the ocean dome in Japan. And so on the left-hand side, you have the kind of approximate AI-generated image that comes close, but makes also clear that this is a very artificial situation already taken in the photo by Martin Parr. The AI-translated recurrence of the photographs is irritating and unsettling, and entails a visual spectrality evoking the photographic spirits of the past. The project shows the after-photographic iconoclastic effects of AI imaging, the looting of iconic works of photography through appropriation, and the vanishing of visual heritage and memory through the recreation process. What do we retain from the history of photography as a reflection of human history when it is absorbed, metabolized, and reconfigured by AI? This brings me to my last act, iconoclast tools of resistance. As Roldan and Molina posited, iconoclasm is not only a systemic effect of digitization on a global scale, but can and should serve as a critique of the digital scopic regime. Applied this way, it, I quote them, can operate as a cutting and limiting measure of the administration of images arranged by the giants of the internet. It can remind us that the image itself is not ocular-centric, digital, or superabundant, and provide subjective escape from the screens. Since the breakthrough of AI imaging in 2022, we can observe an iconoclastic counter-movement initiated and organized by artists, designers, and photographers. They live in the fear that synthetic image generation will not only digitally extract their human artistic creativity as a data training pool, but render their labor, profession, and vocation superfluous in the long term. In December 2022, a first protest by artists against AI-generated work on ArtStation was launched. ArtStation, so it's a leading showcase platform for games, film, media, and entertainment, so it was acquired by Epic Games in 2021. In the early days of promptography, image creators using Stable Diffusion on the Discord server found out that adding trending ArtStation to their prompt would add a distinctive art style to the generated image and make it aesthetically more appealing. The results revealed that the training images for the image generator Stable Diffusion were, among other platforms, scraped from ArtStation website without asking permission of the artists. It is against this unauthorized use of images that the artists revolted. Their protest started with a posting of a logo with the caption "No to AI-generated images" and a tweet by Bulgarian artist Alexander Nanichev stating, I quote, "Current AI art is created on the backs of hundreds of thousands of artists and photographers who made billions of images and spent time, love, and dedication to have their work soullessly stolen and used by selfish people for profit without the slightest concept of ethics," unquote. The logo with a ban on AI-generated images spread quickly and resulted in the formation of a protest movement on the platform and beyond. It finally became the starting point for AI awareness activism as practiced by artists such as Kayla Ortiz, Sarah Anderson, and Kelly McKernan, who have sued AI companies for copyright infringement and image theft. The response of ArtStation to the protest was a regulation that enabled artists, I quote, to choose to explicitly allow or disallow the use of their art for first, training non-commercial AI research, and second, training commercial AI, unquote. The iconoclastic images posted by AI protesting artists were removed from the homepage of ArtStation. As a consequence of this removal, many anti-AI artists abandoned the ArtStation platform. Since then, protests have continued. In October 2024, an international petition against AI visual content scraping was issued by thousands of renowned artists. The core message was, I quote, "The unlicensed use of creative works by training generative AI is a major, unjust threat to the livelihoods of the people behind those works and must not be permitted." In February this year, over 5,000 artists staged a protest against the first ever AI art auction at Christie's, sending an open letter to the House calling for the cancellation of the upcoming auction of AI-generated art. The protest call was not successful in preventing the auction. In response to the ongoing protest activities and complaints, many AI companies have come up with opt-outs for artists that enable the protection of their work from data scraping. But this minimal regulation does not solve the main problems produced by AI imaging and the related industries in the creative field. And it does not really contribute to reducing the value and pay gap between human and artificial content creators. AI image creation is a booming market, expected to grow 17% from now until 2032. So there are high stakes in ignoring or appeasing artists' protests and the creative and legal concerns. The loss of artistic identity and creative intellectual property is a side effect of the expanding markets for AI image generation. The case of Polish digital artist Greg Rutkowski is a good example for the iconoclastic underpinnings of large-scale AI imaging. In his work, Rutkowski adopts classical painting styles to create fantastic landscapes and scenes that serve mostly as illustrations for games. In the years following 2022, his distinctive style became so popular across digital art platforms that it was used for image prompting more often than that of Picasso or other renowned artists. The more AI appropriations it experienced, the more the differences between his own work and the AI versions of it became blurred. Rutkowski realized that in the long run he would not be able to recognize or find his own works on the internet. He says, "The results will be associated with my name, but it won't be my image. It won't be created by me. So it will add confusion for people who are discovering my works. And he continues, all that we have been working on for so many years has been taken from us so easily with AI, unquote. To preserve the originality and truthfulness of artistic work and protect it against AI web scraping and prompting, experts on computer vision have developed more or less effective counter strategies. Nightshades and glaze are currently the best known tools of resistance most widely used by artists against AI scribing and style transfer. The data poisoning tools were developed in 2023 by computer scientists Ban Zhao, Sean Shan, and their team from the University of Chicago to create a powerful instrument against the disrespect of artists' creativity and intellectual property rights. They were made open source for innovative enhancement by users, thus enabling them to become an increasingly powerful tool, able to keep pace with technological developments and requirements. Glaze is a shield that protects artists from style mimicry by text-to-image models, such as Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. It enables artists to apply style cloaks to their art before sharing online. These cloaks apply barely perceptible perturbations to images, and when used as training data, mislead generative models that try to mimic a specific artist. Glaze manipulates machine learning models to interpret the image as something different from what it actually depicts. These manipulations are only visible for the AI computer vision model, not for the human eye. Nightshade functions in a similar way. However, it alters the AI perception of objects in images. It manipulates the machine learning process for image generation and discrimination, producing unexpected results of image poisoning and causing damage to the advancement of image generative AI models in the long run. The object recognition in images uploaded on Nightshade becomes scrambled when used for AI scraping or manipulation. So heads are, for example, turned into cakes, cartoons into impressionist paintings. Both tools, glaze and nightshades, are most effective when combined. Through an intelligent strategy of outwitting artificial intelligence, they attempt to fight its detrimental impact on artists' creative intellectual property. Ryan Jack Lack from the Arts Law Centre of Australia at the University of Sydney notes, I quote, "These tools potentially represent a drastic power shift in favor of artists in their fight against AI infringement," unquote. PhotoGuard, developed in 2023 by MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, is a tool of resistance against the manipulation of photographs that function similarly to nightshade and glaze. It uses perturbations, that is, minimal alterations in pixel values that are invisible to the human eye, to effectively prevent AI models from manipulating the photographic image. This AI countering protection and defense strategy represents a powerful system tool in addition to other forms and practices of photographic image authentication, such as watermarking or Fred Richens' Four Corner project. Iconoclastic attacks on machine learning, such as visual data poisoning, might be an effective tool for deceiving intelligent AI models, but they contribute to triggering an escalating spiral of reciprocal AI combat. Another scenario increasingly outlined by AI developers and researchers on more general system level is that of a model collapse. The main problem is that the consumption of AI-generated data by AI models is outpacing that of human-generated data. The more AI models are trained on synthetic input data, the more useless and undesired output data they create. The collapse typically manifests as a continuous deterioration and not as an instantaneous system crash. In terms of AI imaging, this means the more AI image generators are trained on synthetic images, the poorer their creative output is in terms of content, style, and aesthetics. The loss of visual meaning and feature coding is similar to the gradual dissolution effect of sequential photography, as Andy Warhol's optical car crash serigraph demonstrates. The ecosystem of AI imaging is based on web scraping and feeds back on itself with a final result of self-cannibalization. The model collapse of AI-based image generation represents a form of systemic iconoclasm whose death blow is directed against synthetic imaging. Since we are all unknowingly contributing to it by using generative AI, this type of iconoclasm can be compared to Bruno Latour's classificatory type D of iconoclasm, wherein a person smashes a picture without intending to do so. In its lethal phase, the AI systemic iconoclasm will lead to the extinction of the power of generative image making and the computer vision regime in the age of AI. A countermeasure against this erasure of visual world making would be to remove synthetic image content from visual data sets. However, attempts in this direction have proven not to be very effective, at least for now. For this reason, AI developers for image generation are dependent on visual data sets prior to the proliferation of image generative AI in 2022. As John Burden and co-authors have argued in their paper on model collapse and the right to uncontaminated human-generated data published this year, I quote, "If the infosphere is flooded with untrustworthy synthetic data, this may cause all sorts of severe problems. The lack of discernibly true information might propel society into chaos and endangers the social fabric, keeping us together," unquote. The access to uncontaminated human-generated data is, I quote them again, such an important policy concern that the law should address before it is too late, unquote. So I'm not a legal, but rather visual scholar. For this reason, I don't feel capable of pursuing or judging the discussion over AI protocols and laws concerning data access and regulation. With regard to the post-truth age of AI imaging, burning images to prevent a possible looting does not really offer a solution. We should not leave AI to its own devices to process and eat up everything. The human factor is vital in developing, shaping, interacting with, guiding and governing AI in ways of digital sovereignty. Out of fear of the enormous increase in power of the synthetic image, its potential destruction of truth and reality in the paraverse of both real and virtual life, we could all turn into iconoclasts, fighting against AI-generated imaging and seeking refuge as iconophiles of non-artificial, even pre-digital images. But in the face of a potential model collapse, at the worst-case scenario, we could also feed the machinery of visual machine learning with our own human-created content to strengthen truth and knowledge production, while at the same time protecting our human-generated data from exploitative AI scraping, manipulation, and annihilation through excessive AI training. In the visual AI regime, this interventionist enforcement of the role of human agency should not only include artists, but all types of image creators and image circulators who post and expose images on the internet. Only a symbiotic relationship between human and AI imaging will help to avoid the potentially devastating consequences of synthetic imaging and its effect of derealization and self-cannibalization. The human AI symbiosis in image making and image analysis has not necessarily to rely on an anthropocentric approach, but it definitely implies a new humanistic conceptualization of an integrated, intelligent techno-symbiosis wherein humans retain agency and judgment in an equal and collaborative partnership with AA. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.